Welcome everyone. Today we are starting our journey into the world of programming. We'll be learning about Python, one of the most popular and beginner-friendly programming languages. This course is designed for those who have never programmed before, so don't worry if you're new to all this. By the end of today, you'll have a solid understanding of what Python is and why it's so widely used. What is Python? Python is a high-level programming language, which means that it's closer to human language and easier to understand than low-level languages like C or assembly. It's also interpreted, means that it doesn't need to be compiled before it runs. Python code is executed line by line, which makes it great for beginners. It's used for a wide range of tasks, from building websites and automating tasks to analyzing data and even powering artificial intelligence systems. The best part about Python is its simple syntax that makes it easy to learn, even if you've never written a line of code before. Why learn Python? So, why should you learn Python? Python is one of the easiest programming languages to get started with. Its syntax is simple and clean, which allows you to focus on learning the core concepts of programming without getting bogged down by the complex syntax. Python is also highly versatile. It's used in web development, data science, automation, and much more. By learning Python, you open up doors to a wide range of career opportunities in various industries. Python's features. Let's take a closer look at some of Python's key features. Python is free and open source, meaning that you can download it, use it, and even contribute to it without paying a cent. It's also cross-platform, so you can use it on Windows, macOS, and Linux without having to rewrite your own code. And Python supports different programming paradigms, so whether you prefer to write procedural code, object-oriented code, or functional code, Python has you covered. Applications of Python. What can you actually do with Python? Well, quite a lot. In web development, Python powers frameworks like Django and Flask, which are used to build websites and web applications. It's also a favorite language in the field of data science, thanks to its libraries like Pandas and NumPy for data analysis and TensorFlow for machine learning and AI. You can use Python to automate tasks, create games, and even build desktop applications with graphical user interfaces. Why is Python popular? So why is Python so popular? First, it has an enormous community. There are tons of resources available for learning Python, and if you ever get stuck, chances are someone else has had the same problem and solved it before. Python is also incredibly flexible. You can start with simple scripts and scale up to complex applications. And finally, Python has fantastic documentation, which is especially helpful for beginners. To sum up, Python is a powerful and easy to learn programming language that's perfect for beginners. It's used in many different fields, and learning Python will give you the foundations to explore everything from web development to AI. Whether you are interested in building your own projects or pursuing a career in technology, Python is a great place to start. In this Python crash course, we are going to cover the essential concepts of Python programming. If you are a complete beginner, this course will introduce you to Python data types, control structures, functions, and much more. Let's jump right in with data types and variable assignments. So we're gonna go with data types. Actually, I should put this Okay. Python allows basic arithmetic operations like addition, multiplication, division, and exponentiation. These operators allow you to perform math just like you would with a calculator. Let's explore this. So if I write 1 plus 1, and if I hit Control Enter, I get 2. This adds 2 numbers, so you'll get the result 2. Easy, right? If I have another cell here, and I write 1 times 3, this is a multiplication operation. I mean, this sign here. And you will get 3. And if I write this, in Python, division always returns a float, which means a decimal number. So 1 divided by 2 will return a half. Another example, 2 double asterisk 4. The double asterisk operator represents exponentiation. In this case, 2 double asterisk 4 means 2 to the power of 4, which gives 16. If we say another thing, for example, 4% 2. What is this percent sign? Well, the percent operator is the modulus operation, which gives the remainder of a division. Here, 4 modulus 2 returns 0, because 4 is divisible by 2 without a remainder. But if I write here 5, 2, what do I get? Definitely 1. This will return 1 because when 5 is divided by 2, the remainder is 1. Now, let's hit you with another, a little bit more advanced example. Times 5 plus 5. If I run this one, as you can see, I get 50. Here, Python first calculates the expressions inside the parentheses. So 2 plus 3 becomes 5, and 5 plus 5 becomes 10. Then it multiplies the two results. 5 times 10 gives 50. Okay, let's add a text. Let's talk about variable assignments. Variables are used to store data values, and in Python, you can assign values to variables simply by using the equal sign. These variables can hold numbers, strings, lists, or any other data type. So to give you an example, if you write var equal to, here we are assigning the value 2 to the variable called var. Once assigned, we can use the name of our variable wherever we want the value 2 to appear. So from now on, whenever I say var, what actually appears is the value 2. So here, if we have another example and say x equals 2 and assign 3 to y, and then assign x plus y to z, we get 5. Because in this code, we are assigning the value 2 to x and 3 to y. Then we calculate x plus y, which gives 5. And when we assign that to z, and when you check z, the result will actually be 5. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about strings. Strings in Python are used to represent text. Strings can be created by enclosing the characters in either single or double quotes. So for example, I can write single quotes or double quotes. Oops, sorry. Okay. So you can use either single or double quotes to define strings, but it's often more useful to use double quotes when your string contains apostrophes. So for example, if I have this string and if I've wrapped lots of other quotes, then it is very more useful to actually have double quotations, because in this way, I don't actually have to escape this one character in here. All right, that's great. Now let's talk about printing. Well, printing allows you to display values and variables in the output. In Python, we use the print function to do this. So what we actually do, for example, we say, okay, the hello string is assigned to X, and then we say print X. And as you can see, the result is hello. So right now, you might ask me, oh, here you weren't doing any printing. So how do we actually see the output right here? Then I have to tell you that in most interactive environments, like a Jupyter Notebook, we can actually display the value simply by writing it without having this print function. But actually, for more control over the output, what we do is that we use the print function. So here, we can omit this print and simply write X and get the same value. Okay, let's have another example. If I say number is 12 and name is Sam, and then here I can do something a little bit more interesting. I can say my number is 1 and my name is, definitely 2. And then here, what I can say is format, and 1 is num, 2 is name. Okay, so what am I doing here? Why did this suddenly get so complicated? Let's just run this first. My number is 12 and my name is Sam. Well, the format function that we've called here on a string allows us to insert variables into strings. Here, 1 and 2 are placeholders that get replaced by num and name, respectively. So the output will be my name is 12 and, my number is 12 and my name is Sam. Let's write something else that again looks like this. My number is this guy and my name is, well, this, and then hit format, num, and name. So this is a shorter version of the format function, where the placeholders automatically get filled in by the order of the variables you provide. The result will still be my number is 12 and my name is Sam. Okay, now let's talk about lists. Well, lists are one of the most commonly used data types in Python. A list is actually a collection of items, and these items can be of different types. Lists are mutable, meaning you can change their elements after creating them. So here I can say I have a list of 1, 2, and 3. Well, this is a simple list containing 3 integers. You can store multiple elements of different types in a list. So here, what we could have a string, an integer, and again another list which is nested in the outer list. If I run this, you see that it's just a list. So lists can contain different types of elements, including strings, numbers, or even other lists. In this example, the list contains a string hi, the number 1, and another list 1 and 2. Now, let's jump to a little bit more advanced example. A, B, and C. This is my first list, and then I do something on it. I say, call this function on my list, and then, print the results. So what did just happen? Well, here we first create a list variable called myList with 3 elements. Then we use the append function to add D to the list. Now our list becomes A, B, C, D. So what this append function does is that it adds another item to the end of your list. Okay, let's say a few more things about lists. Something I can do here is that I can say myList 0. What do you think this piece of code does? It's given us A. Well, lists are indexed starting from 0. So this code actually accesses the first element of myList variable, which is A. So if you see here, we have 0, 1, and 2 as our indexes in our list. So if I come here and if I write myList 1, well, surprise, it gives us a B because it's actually the second item in our list. Now, let's do something more interesting. What if we say this? Oh, what does this do? Well, you can also slice lists to get portions of them. Here, myList starting from 1 to the end returns everything from the second element onward, resulting in B, C, and D. So it starts from here. Because we had actually appended D, we have B, C, D. Now, what if I write well, this will actually return everything up to but not including the second element. So the result is just A. Remember, the last number is exclusive, which means it's not included in the result list. Okay, let's do something else. What if I write myList 0 is actually new with single quotations? What did I just do? Well, as I told you before, lists are mutable, meaning you can change their contents. Here, we change the first element of myList variable to new string. Now the list simply becomes new B, C, D. So now let's talk about nested lists. If I come here, I add a text, nested lists. Well, you can have lists inside lists. These are called nested lists, and you can access elements in them using multiple indices. So for example, if I have nest is the name of my list, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then I have another list as my last element, and then again I have another list in here, and that's it. So, well, This is a nested list, where the last element itself is a list. There is something I can do here. If I say nest 3, what do you think it does? Well, this actually accesses the fourth element of our list, which itself is the list 4, 5, and the list of target. And if I do this, nest index 3 and bracket 2. Now if we hit run, as you can see, this accesses the third element within the nested list, which is the list of target. And now if I do this, nest, as you can guess, I'm gonna do 3 and then hit 0. Well, finally, this accesses the first element of the innermost list, which is the string target. Alright, enough with lists. Let's talk a little bit more about another data type in Python, another built-in data type that is actually a dictionary. Well, dictionaries are collections of key value pairs. You can think of them as real word dictionaries, where a word, the key, maps to its definition, which is the value. Unlike lists, dictionaries are unordered, meaning that items don't have a specific order. So here what I can do is that I can say, well, I have a dictionary using curly braces, where key 1 is actually associated with item 1. Then we have key 2 that has item 2. And well, that's enough. If I hit D here, as you can see, I have a dictionary. Here we create a dictionary with two keys, key 1 and key 2, and their associated value, which are item 1 and item 2. So if I want to access item 1, well, as you can see, you can access values in a dictionary by using their keys. Here, D brackets key 1 returns item 1. Okay, let's talk about another data type, Booleans. Well, Booleans represent truth values in Python. They are either true or false. You will use Booleans frequently when writing conditional statements to control the flow of your program. So you can have true. Well, true is actually a Boolean that represents something that is factually correct or a condition that just holds. And as opposed to this, we have false. False is the opposite Boolean value, representing something that is factually incorrect or a condition that doesn't hold. All right, easy, right? Let's talk about another data type, tuples. What are tuples? Well, tuples are actually similar to lists, but with the difference that they are immutable. This means that once a tuple is created, you cannot change its items. Tuples are created using parentheses, as opposed to brackets, which we use for lists. So I can have tuple, which is 1, 2, 3. And then I can say, well, give me the first item, which gives me 1. Here, as you can see, we'll create a tuple called T containing 3 elements, and then you can access elements in a tuple just like you would do with lists. So T0 returns the first element, which is 1. But if I do something like this, and I hit run, as you can see, I just got a type error from Python, and it told me tuple object does not support item assignment because tuples are immutable. So trying to change their elements as we have done here, will result in an error. All right, let's talk about something totally new. What are sets in Python? Well, sets are an ordered collection of unique items. They automatically remove any duplicate element. Well, sets are useful when you want to ensure that your collection contains only distinct items. So if I say I have a set of 1, 2, and 3, as you can see, it's still with these curly braces. Well, this creates a set with 3 unique elements, 1, 2, and 3. So I'm saying unique because even if I say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, or 2, 3, or anything, well, this set initially contains several duplicate values of 1, 2, and 3. But as you know, sets automatically remove duplicates, so the resulting set is just 1, 2, and 3 again. Alright. Next we have comparison operators. Comparison operators in Python are used to compare values. The result of a comparison is always a Boolean, which means true or false. So for example, if I say 1 is greater than 2, well, I actually get false because this checks if 1 is greater than 2. Well, since it's not, the result is false. Now if I write this, well, this actually checks if 1 is less than 2. Since it is, the result is true. Now if we say 1, this guy, well, this actually checks if 1 is greater than or equal to 1. Since they are equal, the result is true. And if we say this, what do you think happens? Well, this checks if 1 is less than or equal to 4, well, which is true because 1 is actually less than 4. Now we have this operator. Well, what this actually does is that this double equal operator checks if 2 values are equal. Here, 1 is definitely equal to 1, so the result is true. Notice that we have 2 equal signs in here. If we have 1, then that's for variable assignment and things like that. But if we have 2 equal signs, then it's a conditional statement. For example, if I say hi is equal to by. Well, definitely false because this checks if the strings hi and by are the same string. Since they're not, the result is definitely false. Okay, let's talk about something else. Logic operators. Well, logical operators allow you to combine multiple conditions. The result of a logical operation is also a Boolean, true or false. So, what we can do, we can have a condition and a logical operator and another condition. So if I hit 1, I get a Boolean value. The AND operator here returns true only if both conditions are true. In this case, 1 greater than 2 is false and 2 less than 3 is true. So the overall result is false. But in another example, we have this condition and we have this condition. Well, the OR operator returns true if at least one of the conditions is true. since 2 less than 3 is true, the overall result is true, even though 1 greater than 2 is false. We have this, for example, or this one. True, because here the first two conditions are false, but the last condition, 4 equals 4, is true. So the overall result is true because of the OR operator. So, well, after talking a lot about data types and logical operators, let's talk about things that make a program actually a computer program. So, we want to talk about if, else if, and else statements. These are very important. Well, conditional statements like if, elif, and else in Python allow you to execute certain blocks of code based on conditions. The if statement evaluates a condition, and if it's true, the block of code inside the if statement is executed. So if I write this, and then come down to write, yep. So if I run this, as you can see, since the condition 1 less than 2 is true, it prints first. We can also have another example in which we say if 1 is less than 2, print first, and else print last. Well, in this code, since the condition 1 less than 2 is true, it prints first. If the condition had been false, the else block would have been executed, printing last. If it was this, and else print last. So let's compare these two. This is first, but this is last, because here this is true, but here this is false. So it actually prints the else part. Okay, when writing conditional statements, definitely pay a lot of attention to the indenting of your program. For example, when you write an if statement, you must put a tab or 2 spaces after it. For example, here, when I write if, then what I actually do is that I hit enter, and then I put 2 spaces in here, 1 tab or 2 spaces. Okay, let's give you another example of this. If 1 equals 2, print first, with the tab and spacing and everything. Else if, which is another condition. Did we talk about else if? I don't think so. Well, elif here is actually a shorthand for else if, and it's basically used to add another condition to your app. So your first condition is if, and then after your first condition, everything else is elif, every other condition, and then at the end you can put else, which checks for the rest of the conditions that you haven't explicitly mentioned. So here, sorry, let's say middle, and else for everything that I haven't mentioned, print last. So if I run this, as you can see in this example, the first condition 1 is equal to 2 is false. So the elif condition 3 is equal to 3 is actually checked. since it is true, it prints middle and the else statement is skipped. So it doesn't actually reach the else part. All right, let's talk about for loops. Loops and for loops. For loops in Python allow you to iterate over a sequence like a list and execute a block of code for each element of that sequence. So for example, if you have a sequence like a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what you can do is that you can actually execute a block of code for each of the elements inside of our list. I can say for item in sequence print item. Yep. This loop iterates over each element in the list sequence. And for each iteration, it prints the current item. So it prints 1, 2, and so on. Now another example is, I can say for item in sequence that I defined above, print yup. What do you think the result is? Just like the one example that I actually wrote by mistake, in this case, instead of printing the actual list elements, it prints yep for each iteration in the list. So it says, okay, first iteration is 1, yep. Second, 2, yep. 3, yep. 4, yep. 5, yep. So it does yep 5 times because we have 5 elements in our list. Now let's hit another example. If I say for jelly or anything in our sequence to the list, print jelly plus jelly. What do you think it does? Well, here the variable jelly takes on each value in the list sequence and it adds the value to itself. For example, when jelly is 1, when it's actually in the first iteration of the loop, it prints 2 and so on. So when it is actually in the second iteration, it prints 2 plus 2, which is 4, and so on. Now, after getting to know about for loops, let's talk about another type of loops, which are while loops. Okay, while loops in Python continue executing a block of code as long as a given condition remains true. What does that mean? Let's see. If I say variable I is equal to 1, and then if I say while I is less than 5, I can just remove this. As long as this condition holds, print I is, well, let's use this format function that we had before, I, and I is I equal 1. So I'm actually adding I by 1 in each iteration, and this loop happens as long as this I is less than 5 condition is actually true. So how many times does this happen? Well, it says I is 1, I is 2, I is 3, and I is 4. Because this loop continues to execute as long as I is less than 5. In each iteration, it prints the current value of I and then increment it by 1. Once I becomes 5, the condition I is less than 5 is false, so the loop basically stops. Now, what if I tell you a little secret that is range function? What does this do? Well, this range function generates a sequence of numbers which are very commonly used for iterating loops. For example, if I say range 5, well, it actually gives me a range object which is from 0 to 5. Well, as you can see, it starts from 0 by default and goes up to but not including the 5. So 5 here is exclusive and is not included. And this range function is very much useful when writing loop statements. So if I want to have a loop that iterates from 0 to 4, I can use the range 5 function, as you see here, and I say print I. Here, the loop, what it does, it iterates over the numbers generated by range 5 function, and then it prints each number. If we say list range 5, what do you think happens? Well, this here is what we actually call casting. So when you do this, what you're doing is that you're casting the range object generated by this range function to a list. And as I said, range gives you a sequence from 0 to 4. So this list is a list from 0 to 4. Alright, now that we know about functions in general, let's talk about some specific functions in Python standard library that are very useful. First thing that I want to talk about actually is, well, map and filter functions. The map function applies another function to all items in an input list. So, for example, imagine I have the list of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. What I can do here is that I can call the map function and then say this times 2 function that we had above and the sequence. And if I run this, this gives me a map object. So what it's actually doing is that it's calling the times 2 function on each item on the sequence list, or seq variable that is actually a list. So if I actually want to see this, I have to convert it to a list. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna say cast to list times 2 and sequence. So as you can see, each item in the list is now times 2. Well, just like the map function, the filter function takes in another function and a list and then only returns the items in that list that are somehow filtered by that function. So I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but I'm going to give you an example. So what I can do is that I can say filter and then pass in a lambda or a function. It doesn't really matter because they're the same thing. If that equals to 0. So this is a function that basically returns true if an item is actually divisible by 0. And I can also pass our sequence. So if I do this, well, again, as you can see, it's a filter object. But if I, cast it to list, what do I get? Okay, so in our sequence list, only 2 and 4 are the functions that can somehow pass this filter. So the filter itself that we have passed into the filter function is another function that specifies what items in our list are eligible to be passed and, pass the filter. Okay, now let's talk about methods. Well, methods are functions that are called on objects or variables. For example, strings and lists have methods that you can use to manipulate them. If I assign, hello, my name is Sam, what I can do is that I can call a method on my variable. So I can say st.lower. As you can see, this converts the string to all lowercase letters, resulting in hello, my name is Sam, without this S being actually in uppercase. And as opposed to this method, what I can do is that I can say sc.upper. So I call another method on my object, and as you can see what I get, all the characters in my string are now in uppercase. I can also do this. I can say sc split. What do you think this does? Well, this method splits the string into a list of words, separating them by white space by default. And if you're unhappy with white space being used as, word separator here, you can also override this default behavior. So what you can do is then you can say go sports, something like this, and then you say this is just random, and then I say, but this time I actually pass in a variable like this. So the variable that I pass in right here is the separator that the split function takes in as, what it uses to split the string. So as you can see here, right now it's detected that, so go sports plus this white space character, it's all a word together, and then the sport is another word. Okay, now let's talk about a few more methods, but this time not on lists, but actually on dictionary. So you remember that we had this dictionary defined right above, right? Its name was D, and it was key 1, item 1, key 2, and item 2. So there is this method. I can say d.keys. Well, as you can see, this retrieves the keys of a dictionary. For example, right now, if D is key 1, item 1, key 2, item 2, d.keys would actually return a dictionary that consists of key 1 and key 2. As opposed to this, I can do something else. I can say d.items. Well, what this one actually does is that it retrieves the key value pairs of our dictionary as tuples and puts them in a list. So each key value pair in my dictionary right now is a tuple, is an immutable tuple, and together all these tuples are actually put in a list. There's also another useful method about lists that I forgot to mention, but I will mention just right now. You can say, okay, imagine you have this list 1, 2, 3. You can say list.pop. What do you think this one does? Well, the pop method removes the last item from the list and returns it. Here, what it actually does, it removes and returns 3 because the last item in our list is 3. Well, that's it for now, but there's also one more useful thing that I think you need to know. Technically, it's not a method, but it's a very useful thing that you should know. So, for example, I can say x in 1, 2, 3. So as you can see, this checks if the value string x is in the list 1, 2, 3. Since it's not, the result is false. So this is basically an operator that produces a condition. It's not a method, but I just thought it's very much useful to know this, so I just, put it at the end. And I can also say, well, x in, x, y, and z. Well, it's definitely true, so this actually returns true. Great job, everyone! This concludes the basic Python crash course. You've learned about key Python concepts such as data types, loops, functions, lambda expressions, and many more. Keep practicing and explore further by diving deeper into Python libraries and application. Have a nice day.